Who is the cultural consumer? What is a cultural consumer? Or rather, who is the cult con, as we like to call him within the band? Obviously, the cultural consumer is into culture, both high and low forms, but they're into it in a very specific sort of way. They have this gotta catch 'em all mentality. If you're into a particular author, you have to read every one of their books in chronological order. And then you have to read books about those books. And then you have to read books about those books about those books. And if you're going to see a film, well, you're going to have to see every film by that director, every film shot by that cinematographer, every film in which the actors of that film had also appeared in. And of course, you're going to want to read books about all these actors, cinematographers, and directors. And if you choose to listen to music, you're going to want to listen to an album, of course, all the way through. But of course, you can only listen to that particular record if you listen to that artist's previous records leading up to it, including all B-sides, including all outtakes. And after you finish that record, you're going to want to read literature about it, of course, in the correct order in which the books were released. So you can now see the poor cultural consumer has an obsessive mind. It's not an entirely pleasant place to be. There are two, I think, major problems with the cultural consumer mentality. One is many beginner cultural consumers weaponize what should be loved. In the Bodega track, Cultural Consumer Part 2, the character sort of becomes a one-upper. I'm sure many of you have come across one-uppers, and I'm sure many of you have probably been one yourself at some point or another. I, unfortunately, have one-upped a few times in my 20s. One-upping can at first seem benign. Oh my God, you're going to love this book. Oh my God, you have to see this woman's work. Oh my God, I actually envy you because you get to experience it for the first time. This reminds me of a question I've often wondered. Does your taste make you a better person? I think so, to a certain extent. I mean, it's hard to shake the notion that enriching yourself with great art will expand your mind, will expand your consciousness. That just seems like a fact. Does it make you a more moral person? It's highly debatable. Mostly what your taste says about you is just reveals what target demographic you belong to. When I was a young person, I thought all of my musical tastes were so special and so unique and really revealed how differently I thought about everything. But of course, as I'm older, I now realize I was marketed alternative music. And because I wanted to be alternative, I decided to like this kind of music. I mean, of course, I think I like the music, but I don't know. It's hard to tell. There's like some weird cognitive feedback loop going on. There's a story that I can't remember who told it, but it's about recording the Grateful Dead. Fans record all their shows and all the Deadheads trade all the tapes. Now, what's so special about the Grateful Dead is they're not really interested in making perfect products, which is what an LP is. They're interested in living in the moment in this sort of jazz kind of way where you improvise in the moment. So I think the philosophy is very beautiful. It's going up on the stage, not without a script or a plan and just embracing the moment. But paradoxically, ironically, with every single note that they ever performed live or improvised live being recorded and now sort of canonical, they sort of turned those live improvisations into products. This brings me to the second problem of cultural consuming, is cultural consuming has a tendency to fossilize. It has a tendency to strip art of its vitality. David Thompson, I'm going to borrow a metaphor from him. He wrote a book called The Big Screen, which when I bought, I thought was just sort of a history of cinema in the 20th century. But it actually has a double meaning. It means, of course, the big screen when you go to the cinema, but also the fact that the movies themselves are a sort of mask hiding reality. So if you watch movies all the time, your perception of the world is going to be colored by them. You're not actually seeing things as they really are. This is kind of what I was getting at in the old Bodega song, I'm Not a Cinephile. Confession, of course, I am a cinephile. I make movies. I love movies. But I'm a specific kind of cinephile. I don't love the screen itself, and I don't love anything that goes on the screen. I am a lover of some of the ideas and emotions of the people behind the images on the screen. And there is a big difference. All movies are not created equal, and there's a certain kind of cinephilia that treats them all as holy objects. But now we're getting into tricky territory because we're talking about some art as being better than other art. And this is a key modality of cultural consumer consciousness, which is creating lists and quantifying and ranking and grading the art that gives our lives meaning. And this is how cultural consuming is sort of just a byproduct of late capitalism. You think you're questing, you think you're self-discovering. Really, you're just buying stuff, and the lists will never, ever be complete. When you've read the 1001 plays and books you must read before you die, well, there'll be another volume. And before you make it through that one, you will die. And a life solely lived through the screen or through pages is, of course, not really life at all. Back when we released How Did This Happen, the cultural consumer showed up in that song. He walked by a protest in Union Square of people who thought Hillary Clinton should have won the 2016 elections. He smugly walks past, heading to the Barnes & Noble. He thinks he's hipper and wiser than all of them, which is most definitely or most probably not the case. But even it is, he's not really doing any good or doing anything with his so-called wisdom. So in Cultural Consumer Part 3, our protagonist, the Colt Con, has rented a zip car, and he is on his way to LaGuardia Airport. He's heading on a wellness retreat in Taiwan. He's sort of on a self-help, spiritual journey, as it were. He imagines that a lover is in the car with him because the cultural consumer lives in fantasy. He finds in the world without actuality. And unlike Bob Dylan, he has never once gazed upon the chimes of freedom flashing. But I want to be a little sympathetic to the cult cons out there. Really, the key idea of the cultural consumer's mind is they want to get closer to the flame. We just have to be careful to not smother the flame. I would like to say to the cultural consumer, next time you watch, let's say, a film, these aren't just signs and symbols on the screen. Those are people who actually all lived diverse, wonderful, or terrible lives. And the moment you're seeing really did once happen.